Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pivot Point DFS NFL Week 2, presented by FanDuel on the Believe Network. I am Keith Cork, and I am here to walk you through all of my favorite plays here for Week 2 of NFL DFS. We are going to recap Week 1. Not a successful Week 1 for me, unfortunately, but that's okay. We're just getting started here. We do have, at least 18 shots at this, so we're going to keep poking away at it. We're going to keep plugging, and we're going to find the right formula to get it down. But as always, we're going to identify where the chalk's going to be, where people are going to be going. I've been spending all week watching what people are saying on the socials, as they say, as the kids say. Maybe the kids don't say that. Maybe it's just the adults or the old folks like me. But either way, we're going to be taking a look at where everyone's going to be and where we're going to pivot, of course, where we're going to find that pivot that's going to get us ahead of the field and beating everyone around us. So without further ado, let's take a look at how we did last week. Maybe I can make this full screen. That'd be great, wouldn't it? There we go. Hey, look at me. I'm so technically savvy. Yeah, week 1, surprising. Lots of surprises. Very interesting slate of that week 1 there. We had Justin Herbert and the Chargers absolutely balling out and going crazy, throwing the ball downfield like crazy, which is just unheard of. We did not expect that to happen at all. At least I didn't. We had the Jets and the Steelers have an amazing back and forth game. That was crazy. Just a lot of things that we didn't necessarily think were going to happen ended up happening. Here's the top lineups, though, from those contests that I told you about last week that I thought were kind of the softest, the ones that had the best ability to you have the best ability to really 100x or 18x your money. The spy and the screen pass. Obviously, I'm going to read these out here for the people that are able to watch the YouTube video or just listening along. For the spy, the top lineup in that contest was Daniel Jones at the QB position, Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson at the running back position, Devonta Adams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Emeka Egbuka at the wide receiver position. Tyler Warren was at the tight end position. Michael Pittman was at the flex position, and the Bengals were the defense there. So obviously, a heavy Indianapolis stack there, which I never really crossed my mind. That was never something I was going to go to. Most of these players were not anyone I was really considering. And we'll talk a little bit about where I kind of made my mistakes or didn't have my best week and where the opportunities for me to improve really are. But yeah, I'm probably not going to land on this lineup at all. So I'm not really too worried about it. The top score there in that single entry contest was 164.58. Pretty low, but that's what all took to take it home. So congratulations to that user. And the screen pass, the lineup there was Justin Fields at the QB, naked Justin Fields, I believe. Yeah, so no other Jets there. So Justin Fields at the QB, Christian McCaffrey at the running back, Devon Achane, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Deontay Thornton, Juwan Johnson, Bijan Robinson, and the Denver Broncos for the defense. So, yeah, definitely some people that I was aware of in that one. Christian McCaffrey, if you guys watched the video last week, I grew more and more enamored with him as the games got closer on Sunday. So I ended up not rostering him in any of my rosters, which was kind of a mistake. But again, we'll talk about where I went wrong. But yeah, that was a guy that was starting to get on. Justin Fields, I did mention as a naked QB, a guy you could run out there, and I thought that was really a solid move. Turns out that turned out to be the optimal move. So interesting stuff there. And then, Juwan Johnson, we're going to be talking about him a little bit later as well. But, yeah, definitely not somebody that I was, targeting at all. There's really no correlation here. I'm trying to see. They did have some Arizona and New Orleans correlation there with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Juwan Johnson, but not really. I mean, there's not really any correlation here that jumps out to me. Oh, they did have McCaffrey and Jackson Smith-Njigba also, which is interesting. So, but yeah, not super strongly correlated. 174.22 was the top score in that contest. Let's meet the chalk here. So these are the people that, when I'm talking about chalk, I'm talking about the people that the entire field is going to be on. Okay, I'm not talking about the top scores. I'm just talking about, who everyone was rostering. So for the QBs and the running backs, the top owned QBs on these slates were Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Flacco. And then I included Joe Burrow also from my spy contest. He did reach double-digit ownership in that contest, in that single-entry contest. So Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, Joe Flacco, and Joe Burrow were the top-owned QBs. For the running backs, it was Jonathan Taylor, James Conner, Devon Achane, Chase Brown, and Alvin Kamara. Okay, so those are the top owned players on those slates. For the wide receivers, we had Emeka Egbuka, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, and Teteroa McMillan. And then for the tight ends, it was really just two guys that kind of stood out from the rest of the field in terms of ownership, and that was David Njoku and Brenton Strange. I included, again, I didn't have to go to both contests because they were really both very similar in terms of what the exposure was to each player. So, pretty, I would say pretty concentrated ownership on the wide receivers. Tight ends for sure. Njoku had 38% ownership in my spy contest, and it was around that in the screen pass as well. Running backs were pretty a little flatter, honestly, than the wide receivers were. So, and we'll talk about that because that was probably my main mistake this week, was really going too hard on my two running backs that I felt very strongly about, which was James Conner and Kenneth Walker. What I like about that, what I did with that is that Kenneth Walker was coming in about 15% ownership or less in these contests. So it was definitely a pivot, and it was definitely something I felt strongly about. So it's what we want to do. Unfortunately, he just crapped the bed. I mean, that's what happens. We didn't really get an edge there at all. It was detrimental for sure to us placing in these contests. So, while the people were getting those Devon Achane and Christian McCaffrey lines and things like that, I was getting, I think, 5 points or something like that from my running back two that I had out there. James Conner was fine. He ended up hitting the end zone, so I wasn't too worried about his kind of lack of performance there. It is what it is. He didn't really sink us, so it's fine there. But these are these are the people I was calling on the podcast. I was saying these would be chalk. So, how do we do? Trevor Lawrence, was he chalk? Yep. Trevor Lawrence was chalk. I said Jaden Daniels would be chalk. He was not. Okay. Not a lot of people went to him. He didn't end up having a good game anyways. But regardless, we didn't roster him either. So Joe Burrow, I said, was chalk, and he did end up being chalk in at least one of my contests. James Conner, I said, would be chalk. Yes, that was easy. Christian McCaffrey, yep. He was definitely heavily owned. He was right below Kamara. He wasn't on my previous screen, so I want to say people that are watching this on YouTube, well, he wasn't on your screen there. He was right below Kamara there, so he was one of the top owned running backs. Chase Brown was definitely very high owned. Devon Achane and Jonathan Taylor, they all had high ownership, so we were right about all of that. For the wide receivers, Emeka Egbuka, yep, he was definitely chalk. Lots of people have him. Ted McMillan, yep. Drake London, yes. Brian Thomas Jr., yes. Mike Evans, yes. Jamar Chase, yes. And Jackson Smith-Njigba. No, he was actually a pivot play, and he was a really, really darn good pivot play. So I was wrong there. That was kind of a big miss. But regardless, we got most of those wide receivers right. And then for the chalk for tight ends, I said David Njoku. Yep, absolutely. And George Kittle. Yes, he was definitely one of the higher owned as well. So, looking down this, I had what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 players I called as, these are the guys that are going to be heavily owned. I was right about 15 of them. Pretty darn good. Pretty, feel like I got a pretty good beat on where we stand, with where the field's going to go. Trying to do some quick math here, but in terms of percentage wise there, we did pretty well as well. So, we know where the field's going to go. I feel pretty confident about that. Again, I had some key pivots there that just didn't work out for us, guys. I mean, it is what it is. When those pivots do hit, that's when we hit the big money, and that's what we're looking for. And so I'm pretty happy with my process so far. 88%, by the way, 88% correct in calling out what the chalk was going to be. In terms of like, who did I miss? Nobody really. I mean, I was pretty spot on with everybody that I thought would be high on. So there you go. Now, my top plays. How do my top plays do? This is where the bad news comes in, right? My top plays, I had Joe Burrows on my top plays. He was 10.3% owned, so he was a bit chalky. Definitely in the lower end of the chalk, though. He did only 1.3x his salary there. A little bit better to look at this on the YouTube video, guys. If you aren't following the YouTube channel, Old Man Squad Network, go follow it and check this out. But yeah, Joe Burrow did not have a good game. The Cincinnati Bengals did not have a good offensive game. They had, I think, 7 yards or negative 7 yards or something like that in the fourth quarter. Ended up winning that game somehow. So it was just a whole bunch of mess. I wound up with Jamar Chase in my big contest as well, and of course he didn't do anything either. So unfortunately, they just he didn't come through for me. James Conner, 27.2% owned. He 2.4x his value, which he ended up getting in the end zone. Did not like what I saw there, the workload, everything. Trey Benson does seem to be garnering some of that workload, and James Conner seems to be happy or content with giving up some of that workload to him. So not necessarily someone I'm looking at too hard this week, but we will talk about this week in a minute here, of course. Kenneth Walker, again, that was kind of that was my key pivot. There's no kind of at all there. That was my key pivot. He was 12.6% owned. So like I said, about 15% or less owned in my contest there. 0.9x for that. He had 5.4 fantasy points. So it was just a whole garbage show. It was not very good. Dylan Sampson was another one of the guys that I was looking to get to. I didn't end up rostering him. I chickened out. I just couldn't do it. I wanted some of the other Cleveland parts. I ended up with Tillman. I ended up with Njoku in my main lineups here. So, which we'll go over here in a minute. But yeah, he was only 0.12% owned. So very low owned. He 3.5x'd his value at 4.9K was his salary. He had 17.3 fantasy points. That was an absolute smash. I wish I would have got to him. Travis Etienne was another guy that I just got scared. I got scared because I didn't know if Bigsby was going to take his work. So I chickened out of it. I didn't go with it. I didn't have him in any of my lineups, but he was 21.6 fantasy points, 5.4K was his salary. So he 4x'd his value and only 3.3% owned. So yeah, hopefully you guys listened and end up making your own rosters and, caught me talking about ETN. And ended up rostering him. I did not. And I'm going to cut down what my top plays are now that we have a little bit more clarity. It is only week 2, so there's going to be some more surprises afoot for sure. But we're going to try to narrow down what we're, calling as our top plays here, so I don't run into this again where it's like, oh, well, I said he was a great play, and then I didn't play that player because I ended up, fiddling with my lineups and trying to get stacks, and it just didn't work out. So, but yeah, ETN did absolutely crush it. Nico Collins was another primary pivot of mine. Definitely thought he was going to be low owned. 10.6% is not bad. That's a pretty good pivot as well. So Kenneth Walker, 12.6%. Nico Collins, 10.6%. I'm, getting some good leverage here with these guys that have, in my opinion, high ceilings. But he only 0.7x2. He had 5.5 points. So you think about it, that sinks me basically. Those guys just did nothing, unfortunately. Emeka Ibuka, I called him Mega Chalk, and I was going to absolutely have to roster him. 41.77% of the playing field agreed. So he was very heavily owned. He 5.1x'd his value, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we needed. Had a big day. That's a big win for me, of course, but that's a big win for most of of everyone that played. So Ted McMillan was another guy that I was pretty high on, and he was 19.8% owned. He only 2.3x'd that Carolina Panthers offense. I don't know if we really need to. I mean, I'm still pretty high on Ted, but it's hard to believe in that Panthers offense. And Bryce Young did not look like he carried over his momentum he had at the end of last season, unfortunately. So 11.8 fantasy points for him. David Njoku, I had him in every single lineup. He was my tight end that I was going with no matter what. Just felt like, he was going to hit the end zone. Didn't happen, of course. 6.7 fantasy points, 1.4x his value at 4.7K for the salary. He was 38.2% owned, though. He's not the guy that sunk me, but definitely not getting any, definitely not helping my lineups, I should say. And then Chig Okonkwo was the kind of pivot off of him that I ended up with in, I think, at least one of my lineups there. He was 1.26% owned, so definitely great with the leverage there, but he also only 1.4x. But his salary was 3.4K and 4.9 fantasy points was what he ended up with. Not great. So yeah, Burrow crapped the bed. Kenneth Walker crapped the bed. Dylan Sampson was great. ETN was great. Nico Collins crapped the bed. Agbuka was awesome, times 2, and then Najuku was not great. So all the other guys were pretty meh. So Chig was also not great. Sorry. So some other notes here real quick. The min cash line for my SPY contest was 122.02. Pretty low value there. The screen pass was 122.92. And, I hear people a lot, fantasy analysts, saying, oh, well, the cash lines are so low. It really doesn't matter, right? You should think of it more in terms of percentages. Like each slate's going to play out differently, right? And there's going to be higher scoring slates and lower scoring slates, just based on what happens across the field, right? It's going to be low lines right now because there's so much uncertainty, right? We don't really know. We think we know, but we gravitate towards these things like Kenneth Walker or whatever. It ends up blowing up in our face for various reasons, right? For me, I think Kenneth Walker might have a bit of a foot injury he's still dealing with, which he was limited in training camp with it. So that might be part of the reason that they ended up having Charbonnet mixed in so much early on. Also, the blocking on Kenneth Walker's run attempts was a lot worse than it was for Charbonnet, and Charbonnet just had the better drive. They really just split the work, and had it gone the other way, and Kenneth Walker had gotten the better drive and gotten the score instead of Charbonnet, I wouldn't be sitting here telling you, it was a terrible call. I'd be telling you, it was an okay call. But I have to be truthful with myself in that, I expected Kenneth Walker to really dominate the touches there, and that didn't happen. So, ultimately it was a bad call, but we just don't know. It's week 1. There's a lot we just don't know, right? We think we know, and we just don't know it yet. I call Justin Fields as a decent naked option, and that's one that won the big tournament. I know that was also in the Millie Maker lineup that won, if I remember correctly. So that was a pretty good call as well. Called and rostered Michael Pittman. He was only 2.34% owned. He 4.1x'd his value with 20 fantasy points at 4.9K for that salary. So I did have him in one of my lineups that almost hit the main cash line. That was one of my screen pass lineups, I believe, which we'll see here in a minute. I called McCaffrey as a good play in the later video, and I just didn't, like I said, I didn't roster him, but he did do well. 12.5% owned in the SPY, 13.9% in the screen pass, and he 3.18x'd his value with 23.2 points. I did call and roster Cedric Tillman as well, which was a fantastic move on my part. He 3.7x'd his value with 16.2 points, and he was only 3.2% owned. Cedric Tillman's been a forgotten man all offseason. I've been drafting him like crazy in my best ball drafts because people just don't seem to want him. They think they seem to forget about him and think, Judy's there. Jerry Judy's the alpha, the wide receiver 1. And I think it's really Cedric Tillman. So I think you can play him even on this slate as well coming up. So, but yeah, my performance here, not great, Bob. 96.62 for my single entry. And if you remember, the min cash line was a 122 or so. So, I fell about 25 points or so short. And really, what you're looking at there is you're looking at Kenneth Walker and for me, David Njoku. I had Joe Burrow as my QB. I had Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 1. That was my big spend up. So, those are really the spots I missed in. And again, I think, overall, I was just so convinced and I had so much conviction about that Kenneth Walker and James Conner was the running back combo you needed. And ultimately that wasn't the case. I had a lot of Kyren Williams as well as you can see from the screen if you're watching the YouTube video. If not, Kyren Williams was only 2.9% owned in the SPY and 3.9% owned in the screen pass, but he ended up having a pretty decent game, 13.9 points and a touchdown, of course. And that's really kind of all you need to know is that Kyren Williams is going to get those touchdown opportunities and most likely convert them. It's what's been happening for a couple seasons now over in LA. So that was a pretty decent call on my part, but ultimately these lineups did fall short. Again, Agbuka hit there. Puka Nacua was my big win in one of my screen pass entries. He was 4.4% owned, 130 receiving yards. So I didn't, have the Nico Collins pivot on either of these, which really helped out. But 113 was my score for my screen pass one. So, and if you remember my the main cash were there with, it was like 126 or something like that. So 129, somewhere in that range. So I was pretty close to min cashing this lineup here, where I had Stafford, Kenneth Walker, James Conner, Puka Nacua, T. Higgins, Emeka Egbuka, Njoku, Kyron Williams, and the Giants defense. But it just didn't happen. So. But that's okay. When you think about it, it's really only the top 20% or so, lineups. If we're lucky, 22, 23, 24% of lineups that main cash in these. And we're not looking to main cash anyways. We're looking to go for that big home run swing. And like I said, my pivots that I had were good. I had, if you see here on the screen here, I had I had two guys here with under 5% ownership. And I had one guy with under 15% ownership. Two, if you count the defense, which two guys. I had Joe Burrow also. So two guys with under 50% ownership. And then on my screen pass, lineup here, I have two guys under 5% ownership as well. So, I feel pretty confident in that. And I feel like, if those guys do smash, we could be looking at a really, really good day. And that's what we're looking at here. So, again, I think I was just too convinced that my Kenneth Walker play there. Mainly, that's what sunk me. So, that's kind of the review there for week one. One thing I did forget to do that I'm going to do in the future is I am going to look at the top scorers, just plain top scorers across the slate. And, I want to see how accurate the chalk is, how accurate the field is in predicting, who's going to have a good day. I think right now we're so early in the season. Again, there's so much uncertainty that it's going to be a low percentage, right? The top scorers on the slate are not going to be the same people that are the chalk that are the most highly owned. So that's why the scores are going to be low. When we kind of got on that tangent a little bit, and sorry, my brain sometimes gets a little distracted, but that would lead to a low scoring slate, right? Because the guys that scored a lot had little ownership. So therefore, overall, the scores were lower. But as the season progresses, we're going to know a little bit more and more about what each situation is, and we're going to be having higher scores, and people are going to be identifying the chalk in terms of points scored a lot better. It's going to be a lot easier to do that. So, but let's talk about our upcoming slate here. Let's talk about week 2. Let's get into what we're looking for here. I got to pull up my notes here. Pardon me. I should have had this up already, but while I do that, I do want to ask you guys to go ahead and follow me on Twitter. As you can see at the bottom there, that is my my handle at DataDrivenOMS, at DataDrivenOMS. Give me a follow, give me a like, give me all the goodness of your hearts or something. I don't know. Give me all the things that I need. But yeah, I want to keep doing this all season, and I have some other ideas in the works as well. But I need your support out there. So give me a follow on Twitter. Give me a follow here on YouTube. Give me a like, all that good stuff. All right. So this upcoming slate, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on. I've spent all week, like I said, just kind of figuring out where the field's going to go and trying to find my areas of opportunity where I'm going to go a little bit different from what the field's going to do and hopefully get a little bit of an edge there. So this is a 12-game slate. And probably need to share my screen here, don't I? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. There we go. Fantastic. So I am looking at the same contest again. Okay. And I do know there was a 400K spy that was out there. I did look at it. I did run it through my same process and give it assign it a grade. And I still think the 150K spy is a better return on your investment, a better chance at 100xing, 18xing your money, things like that. So, so I am still going to be playing 150K spy, even though there is another spy out there. I didn't see any other multi-entries that really made sense to me, but if you guys do see one, shoot it my way. I'll definitely take a look at it and see, what my thoughts are on the value of that contest. But there's some interesting, games here for sure in terms of, when we're looking at here. Let me share this. when we're looking at, what games we think people are going to stack, I do want to take a look at FanDuel here, who does, help sponsor the show, and just take a look at their lines and their spreads and everything like that, and see, if we can determine where people are going to be or what games people are going to be most excited about. I do think that Cleveland Browns, Ravens game is interesting. I don't think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards it because people are going to, on paper, look at it and say it's a blowout, and it's 11.5 point spread, which would indicate it is going to be a pretty widespread blowout there in favor of the Ravens. So I do think the Ravens definitely win this one, but you can definitely script this for the Browns making the game. I think the Browns, offensively especially, are still pretty underrated. Flacco under center there really does give their weapons a little bit of punch. So again, Cedric Tillman, which I talked about before, he has still very decent pricing on DraftKings. He is only 4,300 still. I do think people are going to be on Harold Fannin, and we'll talk about position by position. I am not going to be on Harold Fannin. Njoku's on the field too. I mean, those guys are just taking so much from each other. I'd rather have something in a single entry or a 3 entry like I'm doing that I'm more confident in, something I can kind of hang my hat on, right? And that's not going to be the situation where there's 2 of them that are getting the work there. And so I'm not going to go to it. But there are options there. I think that Cleveland game and, Cleveland-Baltimore game is interesting. The Rams-Titans, probably not going to get a whole lot of love either. Can't say I'm totally in love with it, but there are pieces I do like there, so we'll talk about that. The Bears-Lions, 47.5 for the game total and 6.5 point spread, but I think, the Bears are getting a little underrated, or they're not getting as much love as they should get here. I know people are frustrated with the Bears, trust me. If you were watching my tweets, which I don't know if you were, any of you, but me too. I've lived this for so many years at this point, nearly 40 myself. So I get it, man. It's really frustrating. It's, another year, same old Bears. But the offense did look better. There's no doubt about it compared to last season. And Caleb Williams does have skills that other QBs do not have. That one pass where he had to roll out and was, towing the sideline basically and threw it off 1 foot, falling out of bounds to Roma Dunze, I believe it was, who caught it on the sideline as well. Like most QBs cannot make that play. And that was incredible. Just showcases the level of talent this guy has. And then, of course, he sailed one over DJ Moore's head near the end of the game when we really needed a touchdown. So there's inconsistencies for sure. But I do like what I saw there. I think, there were definitely opportunities for the Bears to score, and it just didn't happen against a Minnesota Vikings team that does have a pretty decent defense. And, definitely, I would say top 10, maybe even top 5 defense there in Minnesota. So, they get the Lions here, which are definitely not that. So I am expecting some more fireworks here. This is a game I'm looking to stack. That I don't think a lot of people are looking to stack because people are down on the Bears. We'll talk a little bit about, what pieces I like there, but that is a game that jumps out to me. The Bills and Jets, this is going to be a popular game to stack, and it's going to be a lot of, Jets players, and it makes me very nervous. The Bills did have a lot of difficulty tackling people, and so, Breece Hall is going to be pretty popularly owned, I think, but I'm not fading this game, and there's certainly pieces I can take from it, but it's not my favorite game to stack. That's not a game I'm targeting. Giants Cowboys, nobody's really going to be that interested in this. There are pieces there, though. 49ers Saints, there are definitely pieces here, and I've got some interest in some mini stacking it, right? I'm not going to stack this too heavily. I'm not going out of my way. Well, but no, there is at least one build I have where I have a San Francisco stack. So I do have more interest probably than the general public. It's only a 40.5 total there, and it's a 3-point spread. The Patriots and Dolphins, I think, this is kind of an overlooked game. Obviously the Patriots and the Dolphins didn't necessarily knock us out of the water in week 1. The Dolphins were terrible, of course. But both these teams could bounce back and have a really good one here. So it's interesting. It's not one that I'm looking at necessarily, but it is interesting. The Jaguars and Bengals is going to be just automatically one of the highest stack games because it's got the highest total, 49.5 over there on FanDuel Sportsbook. 3.5 point spread. So, Vegas or the odds makers are projecting it to be a somewhat close game with a very high total. This is going to be a very popular game. There are pieces here I like for sure, but I am not necessarily going on my way to stack that game. Just not going to do it. Seahawks, Steelers, no, that's just a pass. I really no interest in anything in that game, honestly. Broncos, Colts is kind of the same for me. 43.5 is a total there, 2.5 point spread. But, I think the Colts, got a little lucky there. Well, not lucky. That's not the right word for it, but they had a positive matchup and they took advantage of it. And, I'm not really looking to go up against Patrick Surtain in that defense in Denver. So Denver also struggled. They struggled week one, and I'm just not in love with any of their pieces. So it's not. There's one piece I do love. Let me take that back. There's one piece I absolutely do love. We'll talk about that. But I'm not looking to stack that game. Panthers, Cardinals. People will look to stack this game as well because it is somewhat one-sided, but the Cardinals are also a team that doesn't necessarily blow teams out of the water. So I do think people do stack this game as well. I'm not super interested in it. The game I'm most interested in stacking, the game I absolutely love on this slate, which I think is still going to be a popular game, but I just love it so much, is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Kansas City Chiefs. Two very competitive teams. Chiefs definitely struggled in week one. Definitely looks like they have some holes on their team, but I think we'll talk about these pieces some more, but I think Patrick Mahomes is going to have to do a little bit of hero balling, right? He's going to have to throw the ball and really look to put some points up here against an Eagles team that also puts up points like crazy, right? So I think being the over here over 46.5. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure where the line opened. I have to look at that, but I would guess it probably opened a little bit lower than that. But I do think, there's some holes on that Chiefs defense, so the Eagles should have a pretty good day. And then the other side of that, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes still, so that's kind of what I'll say. And he can make magic happen, man. He was making magic happen last week, and they just happened to fall short. But similar to Josh Allen, as long as you have him on your team, there is a way. So, and then you've got the Falcons and Vikings. Not a game I'm going on my way to stack either. So, but let's talk about the chalk. Where are people going to gravitate towards? Who are they going to play? For QB again, I don't think there's a QB on the slate that really jumps out to me. Let me go ahead and share. Let me share this real quick. Excuse me. Yeah, we're going to share our slate again there. Yeah, it's in terms of the QB here. Hello. Oh, there we go. Sorry, guys. I'm new here. So in terms of the QB here, you've got Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson on this slate. So you definitely have some QBs that can, kind of take off with it. And Jalen Hurts as well. QBs that are in that elite tier that can really put up points. We saw Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson do that last week against each other. But what you want with those elite QBs, you want them in a game situation where it's going to be a competitive game and they're going to have to really ball out to help their team win. I definitely don't see that with Baltimore against Cleveland, Buffalo against the Jets. I also don't see it. If anything, the Jets defense might give them fits. I don't see the Jets putting up a ton of points again this week around. So I'm not super interested in Josh Allen here as a result. No one really sticks out to me as like an interesting or a good play just by themselves, except for Justin Fields. Again, Justin Fields is a fine option to go ahead and run out there naked. He's a guy that can get yards with his legs. So he is a guy that does stand out as a guy that you can play just by himself. So really, there's not a lot to like there in terms of quarterback or a lot. There's not going to be a lot of ownership on one single player or on a few different players. At the running back position, though, we have a pretty clear group of running backs that are going to have the ownership here. And in my opinion, that's going to be, CMC, Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be Devon Achane. It's going to be Chase Brown and Javonte Williams. Christian McCaffrey, look, there's no George Kittle. There's no Brock Purdy. They still don't have, they might not have Juwan Jennings. I think he's still questionable right now. They're just down so many pieces, and they're going to be going up against the Saints. So I'm sorry, y'all. I had to pause real quick and come back because I was not finding this 49ers and Saints game on the docket. And it just doesn't appear to be there. I'm not sure why. That's very strange. But anyways, it is definitely a game that's happening on Sunday. And we do want to play McCaffrey, just to kind of pick up where we left off there. McCaffrey is a guy that we do want to play just because of the limited offensive weapons on the Niners side. And the fact that they're playing the Saints, who are a dreadful, terrible team, and they should still win, even though they're down several key pieces. There's a funny theory out there that McCaffrey is stealing all the life force from all of his teammates in order to be able to stay healthy throughout the season. Maybe there's something to it, man. I don't know. I am looking at Trent Williams, the offensive lineman. I'm looking at his status as we get into Sunday. He is currently questionable. I believe he got in a limited practice, or maybe he didn't practice today. Actually, I think I can probably look that up real quick here. Trent Williams, left tackle. He is questionable to play for week 2 so far. So that's his official designation. So Juwan Jennings also questionable. So, I am watching Trent Williams to see, if he has played. Trent Williams is really the big thing here. Without him, the rushing game does struggle. But even so, McCaffrey does get so many yards, via air. And, he's still a viable option. He's still a guy I'm looking to roster pretty much in all of my lineups here. Devon Achane, I'm not not really buying this Miami team. I know people want to say that there's going to be a bounce back here of some sort, and maybe they're right. I'm not super interested though here in this game of this Patriots. It doesn't do it for me. I have no excitement there. Chase Brown, on the other hand, not a guy I'm typically into in like season long and best ball and things like that. But for the purposes of DFS week 2, I'm all in. I think Chase Brown's a really great play. I love him here against Jacksonville. That doesn't have a great defense, and their offense is struggling as well. This is a game I think can be tagged as a potential shootout here. But Chase Brown is a piece that I do have a lot of interest in, that other people are going to be on as well. And another guy I think is going to have a lot of ownership here that I mentioned is Javonte Williams. And the reason for that being, this is kind of the spend down option that everyone's going to default to after he fell into the end zone twice. And, at first I was a buy. At first I was all in, and I was thinking, okay, I think I'm going to buy this guy because everyone else is going to fade him. But there's so much love out there for Javonte. I thought people were going to be smarter, and they're not being smarter. It's not happening. He only had 50 rushing yards last game, right? Yeah, 54 rushing yards. He fell in the end zone twice. Okay, and we know the Cowboys want to pass the football. We know that CeeDee Lamb wants to recover from his drops from week 1. We know that Dak Prescott wants to sling that rock, and unless people are getting tackled at the 1-yard line like they were in week 1, Javonte is not going to have that ceiling that you guys think he's going to have. It's just not going to happen. And there are other guys in that range, which we'll talk about here as pivots, that I want to get to. He's 5,800. There's a couple other guys in that range that I would rather get to. But moving on. Wide receiver, where do I think people are going to gravitate towards? T. Higgins. Just because of that game, I said that was going to be a game that people are going to be targeting pretty heavily there. That's the one that's got the 49.5 total there. Again, I like Chase Brown there, but if I like Chase Brown that much, I'm not going to play T. Higgins. I'm not going to play Jamar Chase. those are guys that are going to get a lot of ownership, and I'm just not going to be on them this week just because if I'm going to get a piece of that, I'm going to get Chase Brown 6.8K. I just like the price point better. And, I liked what I saw in week 1 in terms of usage, in terms of, he was on field and was the bell cow, basically. There's not anyone that's really challenging him for that role. So Puka Nacua at 7.6K. Yeah, I'm into it for sure. He came through for me last week. I have no reason to believe that he's not the alpha for Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford is a kingmaker for his wide receiver 1, and then anyone beyond that doesn't really get a whole lot of target share. But his wide receiver 1 goes off, and it seems clear to me even after week 1 and when I was drafting him 30% of my best ball P teams all summer, that Puka Nacua is at wide receiver 1 in LA. And that's who Stafford's going to make a king out of. So 7,600 for Puka Nacua. I'm all in. Sure, give me that. I'm going to have at least one lineup here with him in it. The one I really like, though, the play I really like that's going to be somewhat chalky is Malik Neighbors. He's going to be, one of those 15-ish% owned guys, 10 to 15%. So, not super, super contrarian, anything like that. But he's getting so much target share. Wan'Dale Robinson is a little bit banged up. He's a little bit questionable, but I'm really not concerned about if he does play or he doesn't play. That Dallas secondary, Bland is injured. It's going to be bad. It's a really good matchup here for Neighbors, and I think he's going to be popular, and I think it's warranted. But I want to have some of that on my teams for sure. And a cheaper option I think is going to go highly owned and be pretty chalky is Hollywood Brown as well. And, no Xavier Worthy, obviously. I'm surprised Xavier Worthy's even going to try to play soon. I thought he'd be out for probably like a month at least, but it seems like he might be trying to play in a couple weeks here. But either way, Hollywood Brown was the obvious guy that stepped into that role. And, was heavily targeted. I think he had, 16 targets, I believe, in week 1, if I remember correctly. Yep, 16 targets, 10 receptions, 99 yards. Just absolutely went off there in a game that Kansas City was, coming from behind. The Chargers came out and just slung the rock, man. That was crazy. We did not expect that to happen. At least I did not, at least. And that happened. And then the Chiefs tried to make their comeback. So Hollywood Brown was, heavily involved in that sense. It's the Chiefs, man. They're gonna, spread. Travis Kelce's still there. Juju Smith-Schuster came in and also was heavily involved. He had 5 targets for 55 yards, 5 catches, a 16-yard catch. Tyquan Thornton also was involved. So, they're going to spread it around. I'm not too convinced that, it's going to be a Hollywood Brown show. It's going to be the Hollywood Brown show. Kareem Hunt can also catch the ball as well. I think, he's a fine play. I'm totally going to have some lineups with him. I'm not definitely not going to be fading him or anything like that. And I love that game. I love stacking that game, but I think we need to be a little bit careful with that. I really do. I think the guy that you want to look for on this team is Juju Smith-Schuster in those large field GPPs and as a pivot off of Hollywood Brown, because of that ownership is just going to be through the roof. And, if it ends up being he craps the bed, or, even if ends up being, Mahomes throws to Kelce for a couple touchdowns, or Mahomes hits Tyquan or Juju Smith-Schuster for a touchdown, but Hollywood Brown gets, 60, 70 yards, you're getting an edge there. So I would caution against stacking or rostering Hollywood Brown on too many of your rosters. If you're doing 100 rosters, I wouldn't do 80 of them. I'd probably do 20 of them, right? I'd be pretty under the field in terms of ownership myself. So at the tight end position, what are we looking at as the top tight ends there? We are looking at Trey McBride in that game against Carolina, which I like it. I think that's fine. I'm not necessarily looking to go there. I'm not fading or buying, honestly. If I end up on him, he's the most expensive tight end on the slate, is the thing. He's 6,000. I'd rather spend my cash elsewhere, personally. But if I end up on him, I'm really not that upset. If I can, get up to Trey McBride, seems pretty safe. Seems like a good cash game play. Perhaps he finds the end zone this game. That'd be nice. There are other weapons on Arizona that I do like a little bit more too. So I like Marvin Harrison Jr. And I like James Conner a little bit more than I like Trey McBride. So I'm not really on him at all, but he's not a bad play. He's going to be very heavily owned. Travis Kelce is another guy that's going to be heavily owned, another chalky guy. And since I like that game so much, I have to be a buy, right? I have to be a buy, and I have to be able to stack Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes on at least one of my teams. And then the other popular tight end here, again, I mentioned him before, but Harold Fannin at 3.1K. This is the value option people are going to go to. I'm fading, guys. I really am. Maybe he burns me. Maybe you guys are right. Maybe Harold Fannin is the next David Njoku, right? Maybe he is the guy that you want to have on Cleveland. But I just feel like it's going to go back and forth. I feel like Njoku's still there, and he's still going to get plenty of work. Now they got Quinshon Judkins that's perhaps going to get in the mix there, and maybe not necessitate so many passes. So I'm pretty wary. I'm fading him. I'm not playing Harold Fannin. The guys I'm pivoting to that probably going to be higher on than the rest of the field. Again, I mentioned that QB, Justin Fields. Justin Fields was fantastic. Justin Fields was almost flawless in that game in week 1, and they end up still losing the game, which is pretty hilarious and interesting. But he was fantastic, Brad. He was like, 73% of his passes were completed, 16 out of 22 passes, 9.9 average on his passing yards per attempt. 33-yard pass. He was hitting Garrett Wilson in stride. He was really stepping up in the pocket and having a really great pocket presence, which we didn't see in previous seasons. I'm happy for Justin Fields, man. Of course, as a Bears fan, we love to run people out of our city, our quarterbacks, without giving them much of a chance at all. And Justin Fields is definitely one of those in a long line of those. And I think he had some potential. He had some talent, and he really showcased that in week 1. So I'm looking for him to continue that. I think he's going to be a strong play until his salary comes up. He's always got that ability on the ground. The other guy I'm really into is Mac Jones. And, look, Shanahan offense, is it going to be again? I can't look at this game, guys. It's not out here. If you guys see this game on my screen, I swear I paused this for a good 5 minutes. I try to look for this game. I could not find it. It's not here. It's just crazy. It's a bug of some sort. Anyways, no, Mac Jones I think does step in here though and has a decent game. He's got the ability to get yards with his legs as well. He's only 4K. So I have to actually search him here to show you guys his salary in the video. But yeah, he's only 4K, but it's a great, obviously a great matchup against the Saints. Again, those weapons are kind of down. Maybe the Saints make a game out of this. And it goes back and forth. I have at least one, lineup where I'm going to be stacking Mac Jones with Ricky Pearsall. Hopefully Juwan Jennings is out. And I have McCaffrey on there, and I have a bring back in, either Chris Olave or I have Juwan Johnson, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But yeah, I do like Mac Jones a whole heck of a lot here. I think he's a really great guy, great pivot off of the safer QB options. So he's definitely more of a GPP play. But at 4K though, I don't think he's a bad cash play either. I think in order to 3x, 4x that value, he only needs 16 points or so to 4x. So I really don't think he's a bad value cash or GPP, honestly. Some running back guys I'm looking at that'll probably be I'm higher on the field. Jahmyr Gibbs at 7.4K. I like that Bears Lions game to be more competitive than people are making it out to be. And if that is the case, I do think that these teams are going to go at it offensively. And Gibbs, he has had big games against the Bears too. And he has that explosive ability. So 7.4K, that ceiling there. I mean, there's no other running back on the slate that has a higher ceiling than him, aside from McCaffrey. McCaffrey's probably the one I would say, but other than that, he's the next guy, and it would not surprise me to see him be the RB1 on the slate for sure. James Conner gonna go under owned compared to what he's got here. Again, it's a positive matchup here. Against the Carolina Panthers, who are just bad on defensively all around. but he's going to go lower owned here because we didn't see a whole heck of a lot that we liked in week one, as I mentioned, and Trey Benson taking some of his work there, but he did find the end zone. Very likely, I'd say, that he finds the end zone again in this game. And, if he can get a little bit more success on the ground there, he did have 12 attempts. So if they can get out to a big lead or he can get more success on the ground, he is a guy that has a similar or better, ceiling or even floor than other guys in that same, pricing area here. So if you look at other guys that are around James Conner, you got Jonathan Taylor, who I'm not super into because I'm not really into Indianapolis against the Broncos here. Chase Brown, I'd rather have, but he's $200 more. Below him, there's not a whole lot, right? There's James Cook, there's Kyren Williams, which I like. We'll talk about in a minute. Breece Hall, 6,200. So there are options for sure. I just think he's going to go under owned compared to what he is. Kyren Williams, like I mentioned just a minute ago, is a guy that I really am interested in as well against the Tennessee Titans. So, and Breece Hall. Like, don't forget Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a guy that, like I said, I think he's going to be pretty high owned just because Buffalo, like, they let Derrick Henry just run all over them. So people are going to look at that and lick their chops and say, okay, Derrick Henry's a guy that I can get on for sure. He's going to have a really good game. So I think, all those guys there are interesting. Now that I'm kind of saying it out loud, I'd probably drop James Conner from this list, to be honest with you guys. I want to be transparent. I did some prep work here, but you shift things around, and sometimes things, when you look at them a different way, you kind of realize. So, maybe James Conner's out for me because I'd probably rather have Breece Hall with $400 less or Kyren Williams for $300 less. But, if you end up with James Conner in your lineup, I don't think it's bad at all. I don't think it's a bad play at all. Another guy that I think is going to be probably under-owned compared to what he should do is Travis Etienne. They did just trade away Tank Bigsby. That happened earlier in the week, and people might forget about that at this point. But, Bishal Tootin probably going to be involved here. But the ramp up for Tootin is going to take a little while. So I think this week and, maybe even next week and the week beyond that, we probably have some pretty heavy Travis Etienne days. And, that is a game that has a really high total. I think people are going to be all over the passing attack there for Jacksonville. So, Etienne's not going to get a whole lot of love because people are going to they're not going to want to stack Jacksonville that heavily. So I think, he is a really good play as well. And a good pivot off of a guy like Javonte Williams, who's going to have high ownership. At the receiver spot, I already mentioned Malik Neighbors. Marvin Harrison Jr. Is definitely a guy I'm interested in. He's only 5.8K. Price is so cheap. And he, had a really big bomb touchdown pass that, just didn't connect. If that does connect, he has a huge week one. Maybe that does connect in week two. I think the ceiling is absolutely there. I think the floor is a little bit less safe than other options as well. But that doesn't really bother me too much. He only had 6 targets in week one, so that does concern me a little bit. But he did have a 45-yard catch and another big one, like I said, that they just couldn't connect on. But he had a touchdown as well. So, I think he's a guy I'm really interested in terms of a ceiling play for sure. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Bears corners are banged up. I know Jalen Johnson practicing most likely going to play here in week 2, but no Kyler Gordon still. So, the Bears are still down very key pieces here. And we saw what happened, with J.J. McCarthy taking over in quarter 4. When the Bears, were down to like their cornerback 4, 5, it was ridiculous. Like they're so banged up back there that the Vikings just had their way through the air. And so I think, Amon-Ra can really take advantage of this spot for sure, especially in a game where the Lions can't go down 0-2, right? It just can't happen. Like the Lions go down 0-2 and questions start to be asked, right? So this is a game where I expect the Bears are probably going to lose. I expect it to be competitive though. In those kind of environments, of course, we want to have those star players. So Amon-Ra is definitely on my list, and I think I'm going to have at least one game where I stack him against a Bear stack. Calvin Ridley at 4.9K is another guy that's popping up as a really good value for me anytime I just try to look at the slate and jam people in. If you want to go to the value route, I think Calvin Ridley at 4.9K against the Rams, where I do feel like, the Titans are competitive in week 1, and they're going to be competitive here offensively again in week 2 with the Rams, but they just couldn't really sniff the end zone there in a tough week 1 matchup against Patrick Surtain in the Broncos. So I think here they have a better matchup for sure. I think Calvin Ridley has a nice bounce back spot here as well. So he's a guy I'm looking at pretty heavily. And then beyond that, here's some large field GPP plays at wide receiver that I like. I like Josh Palmer, 4.4K. Getting slept on. I've mentioned him before a couple times on my Twitter. When I'm talking about putting out the NFL bets, I bet his over prop for his yards. He did go over. That was an insane game though, so a little bit lucky, I guess. But I just feel like Coleman went off in that last game, but it really can be anybody on the Buffalo team that can go off. He saw 9 targets in that game, 61 yards, compared to other weapons here. Coleman saw 11 targets and Shakira saw 9 as well. So it was pretty evenly split, and he's only 4.4K, so he's the cheapest of the bunch. Again, I do feel like the Jets the Bills do beat the Jets pretty handily. I think it's going to be a pretty easy win for them, but Palmer, I think, does jump out to me as a nice value there. Cedric Tillman, 4.3K. Yep. I mean, again, overlooked constantly. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team all season. So I would load up on him while you can until his price does raise up to where it should probably be. And then Olamide Zaccheaus on the Bears. He's a 3.6K option. I would only do him a game stack. So if you're doing a Bears-Lions game stack like I'm planning to do, I'm considering him in something like that. But he did see quite a bit of targets. I think I've been telling you guys. I know I've been telling you guys about him for weeks now, just based on what we saw in the preseason. And he's going to be a problem here for DJ Moore and Luther Burden. And he was. I mean, he was heavily involved. 7 targets, 4 catches, 42 yards. Of course, didn't find the end zone, and the Bears did struggle to score. And that's always going to be a problem. There's inconsistencies, like I said, but I do like him in a game stack for sure. At the tight end, some guys I'm looking at: Tyler Warren at 4.5K. Just be aware that Josh Downs was not super involved in that week 1 game, and the Colts didn't really need to push the ball on the field. But considering this week. Considering this week that they get the Broncos and it's going to be competitive and they're going to have to, push the ball a little bit more down the field, I would consider Tyler Warren. It looks like he's there's a lot of mention about, him being the focal point of the offense. We get those all the time. They're not always true. But for him, I think, he was very heavily involved in week 1. There's no reason for us to believe he won't be in week 2. He saw 9 targets, had 76 yards on 7 catches. So, very heavily involved. And could very well be heavily involved in week 2. I have no problem going there. And then I still like Chig. Again, I said Tennessee probably going to be competitive in this game. I don't discount their ability to win this football game. They very well could pull it out. 3.3K is his salary now. But yeah, I do think he's an interesting guy for sure. And I'll point again to just Cam Ward, what he did in college in terms of what he did with his tight end in the red zone. He heavily targeted his tight end in the red zone, and I think that's going to carry over to the NFL, considering they get there this week in this game. Okay, but who are my plays? Who are my top plays? And there's a couple of guys here we haven't really hit on yet that I love that we just haven't gotten to. But these are my top plays. If I'm going to give you kind of a core to build with here, again, for some reason, this game's not popping up in the games for me, but Christian McCaffrey, I expect him to be 40% owned or higher, and rightfully so. And there's no two way about it. I'm happy to roster him and him to put up a dud, and I'm still okay because half the field has him, as opposed to not rostering him. And he's kind of the free space this week, right? So I think Christian McCaffrey has to be in all my lineups. The other guy I'm super into is Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith is a guy that I'm going to be jamming into 75% of my lineups probably. He tears up the Chiefs, right? I'm actually going to go ahead and show you guys this. This is from my guy, Thunder Dan on Twitter. 1 second here. Let me see if I can find his little tweet. There it is. So Devonta Smith last season in games that Dallas Goedert missed. Goedert's not going to be in this one. 7 targets and 70 yards per game, right? And if you toss out the Giants game, it's 7.8 targets and 81.5 yards per game. His salary is $5,600 on DraftKings. And he did score a touchdown in the Super Bowl there. So, very great performances against this. Again, shout out to Thunder Dan here. Thunder Dan at Thunder Dan DFS. He does great work, of course. Go give him a follow. But, a team that, or a guy that absolutely destroys his team. Oh, I just removed myself. Whoops. Did I not show you guys that tweet? I'm sorry. There's the tweet. There it is. Oh, I'm bad at this, guys. But yeah, anyways, that's our guy, Thunder Dan. But yeah, a guy that absolutely destroys his team. It's a game I want to stack. I am all over Devonta Smith. I want to have Devonta Smith in all my lineups here. So he's definitely on my board there. Here we go. And let's get back to DraftKings. The other guy I'm looking at here very heavily to get in all of my lineups that I think is going to go vastly underowned compared to what he's going to do is Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton, 6,300. He's a guy that not that exciting. People aren't really jumping at the bit to roster him. Saw 9 targets in week 1, caught 6 for 61 yards, had a touchdown. I think this is again going to be a pretty good game. Again, I think Tennessee is going to give. I think Indianapolis is going to give the Broncos fits. They prove they can do it. They prove they can move the ball down the field in week 1. So, hopefully, Indianapolis can find the end zone a time or two, because going the other way, Courtland Sutton has a really great matchup. Has the advantage in this one for sure. So 6,300 for Courtland Sutton. That's another one of my core plays there that I really want to play. And the other guy I want to get to in, again, 75% of my lineups or so is tight end, and it's going to be Juwan Johnson. I think he's going to be somewhat heavily owned. I could see it being close to 10% owned on this slate. I hope not over. I hope he's about 10% or under. But Juwan Johnson, played an insane amount of snaps. And again, I'm really interested in McCaffrey. I'm interested in Mac Jones. I'm interested in Pearsall if Juwan Jennings doesn't play. So I'm interested in all these 40-yarders I need to bring back here. Juwan Johnson is a cheap one. He's 3,600 and had a really good week 1, and he was on the field a whole heck of a lot, right? He saw 12 targets, 8 receptions for 76 yards. Didn't score a tutty, but it doesn't matter because those are still really great numbers for his price tag. And his price didn't come up a whole heck of a lot. It was only $3,300 last time, but $3,600 now. Only cut $300. I am all over Juwan Johnson. I want to have him in basically all of my lineups. But that's really the one that that's the tight end I want to play if I'm not spending up on one of those other ones I was talking about. So those are the guys I'm looking at heavily. Those are the guys I'm probably going to land on. Those are my thoughts for week 2 NFL action. And again, I didn't share my screen. Wow, I'm a sucker. There he is, Juwan Johnson. Wow. Sorry, guys. I will get better at this as the season goes on. It's been a while. Look at the gray in my hair. I'm old. I'm an old man. Forgive me. It's technology. What can you do? Sorry, I'll probably stop itching my nose so much too. I promise I didn't go do a line in the bathroom. I just have allergies, and that's why I'm itching my nose so much. But anyways, guys, point being, that was NFL DFS week 2 for Pivot Point DFS. I am Keith Cork. You can follow me on Twitter at DataDrivenOMS, at DataDrivenOMS. Please do go follow me there. Please like and subscribe to the show. Again, we are looking to hit that big one. I'm going to see if I can get Dan to make me a Discord server, Discord room in the server, a little place where we can go ahead and talk DFS. But if you're not in that server already, hit me up on Twitter or something. I'll get you in there. But we can talk about DFS up until kickoff and see how we're feeling about things. If we want to switch things around, what's changed. There are a couple of very key injury, bits of injury news that we're looking at here that could change all of this. It is Friday night, of course, so by Sunday things could change a little bit. So again, thank you for listening, and y'all have a great day. Go get that money.